Some stories aren't told out loud, not because they don't matter, but because they hurt too much to say. They live in the silence between footsteps, in the way a parent avoids your eyes at the dinner table, in the years you spent trying to be enough for people who never really wanted you. This is one of those stories. It's about a daughter who gave everything, and was told, in the end, that she should never have been born. But it's also about finding your voice, even if you have to write it down first. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or wondered if love could ever feel safe again, please, take a breath, and listen. And if this story touches something inside you, don't forget to subscribe to their family stories. Like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. We read every word, because sometimes, the stories we keep to ourselves are the ones that need to be heard the most. We should have stopped after Ryan. She was a mistake we never corrected. It was nearly midnight when I heard it, that sentence. Clean as a knife and twice as cold. I'd just returned from picking up Mom's blood pressure meds. The same ones I'd driven to get every second Thursday since she got sick. The TV wasn't on, but their voices carried from the living room like something waiting to be heard. She's 28 and still in that room. Dad said, it's like she never left high school. And Ryan's got his own condo now. A life. Mom added, sharp and slow like she was carving each word. Elena, she just lingers. Like fog. We should have stopped at 1. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I stood in the hallway in my worn-out sneakers and grocery store jacket, frozen in place like the ghost they'd always seen me as. No one defended me, not even each other. There was no joke to soften it, no awkward laugh to take the edge off. Just silence, then the hum of the heater kicking on like it, too, had heard enough. I didn't cry. I didn't run in and scream or ask them how they could say something so cruel. I just turned around, walked back into my room, and sat on the edge of the bed where the floral sheets were still tucked tight. Just like Mom liked them when I was 10. It's funny, the body goes cold before the heart does. There was no plan, no dramatic decision. I just stood up, pulled my old suitcase from under the bed, and started folding my clothes. Soft things first, the sweaters I'd worn until the sleeves thinned. The shirts that still smelled faintly like library dust and coffee. I packed slowly, carefully. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that I still had control of something. The suitcase filled too quickly. I left behind most of my books. The lamp shaped like a teacup from childhood. Even the picture frame with a photo of me and Ryan, both of us laughing. Before I learned that love had requirements I couldn't meet. But I kept one thing. The journal. Black leather, frayed at the edges, with gold-tipped corners and a crack down the spine where I'd opened it 1,000 times. It was the only place I ever really told the truth. The only place I ever existed without explanation. I sat down at my desk and opened it one last time. My pen shook a little. But the words didn't. Tonight, I became invisible. Not metaphorically, not the usual way. Not the forgotten birthday or the quiet insult. No. Tonight they said it, that they regretted me, that I should never have been. I thought I'd feel broken, or furious, but all I feel is stillness. Like something inside me finally gave up asking to be seen. I'm leaving tomorrow. I don't think they'll notice. I slipped the journal beneath my pillow, zipped the suitcase shut, and sat in the dark until morning. There was no note, no goodbye, no confrontation. I didn't owe them that. I was up before the sun, stepping softly down the hall. Each creak of the floorboard a memory I didn't want to carry. I paused in the kitchen, the place I'd made 1,000 meals. Brewed Mom's tea, packed Dad's lunch, and I didn't feel a thing. I didn't take one last look back. Because sometimes, when a place has hollowed you out so completely, the only thing left to do is walk away. And so I did. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the one thing I meant to take with me, the journal under my pillow, was still there. The bus station was nearly empty. Just a few people scattered like ghosts at the edge of the morning. I sat with my suitcase resting against my knee, a paper cup of watery coffee in one hand, and nothing else. No texts, no calls, no one wondering where I was. I wasn't running away. Not really. I was just done waiting. For most of my life. I thought love was something you earned. You kept your voice low. Your head down. You offered help before they asked. You apologized for things you didn't do. Just to keep the air smooth. You did the dishes. Remembered their appointments. Stayed up folding laundry while they talked about your brother's new promotion over dinner you made. And still, you stayed hopeful that maybe one day, they'd see you. That morning, I let that hope die in the bottom of that coffee cup. I didn't have a plan. I'd withdrawn $300 in cash from my savings jar, tucked it into a book jacket, and brought along my library card and a small flash drive with the only copy of my novel in progress. I figured I'd head east. Maybe find a room in one of those quiet coastal towns I'd always dreamed about. I could work at a small bookstore, write in the mornings, and go to sleep without the weight of being an unwanted daughter. It was a strange kind of peace. Not joyful, just still, like my heart had finally stopped trying to fight upstream. Back at the house, I imagine it took hours before anyone realized I was gone. Probably when Mom needed her tea or asked for her pain medication. She would have called my name once. Maybe twice. Then sighed and made it herself. Dad wouldn't have noticed until dinner. And then there was the pillow. The one I forgot to check. The one with the journal under it. Still slightly warm from the night before. I didn't know this part until much later. But I can picture it like it happened yesterday. Mom probably pulled back the bedding to make the room look tidy. Maybe muttering about how I never made my bed properly. Maybe she was preparing herself for another complaint about something trivial, how I left my shoes out. Or forgot to refill the toilet paper. Instead, her hand brushed something hard and cold. Leather, with my initials etched faintly into the corner. She must have opened it out of habit. Or maybe curiosity. Or maybe something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. The first page was dated when I was 17. A note about how I didn't cry when my dog died because I didn't want to be called dramatic. Then pages about Ryan, how everything he did was framed in gold. Even when he forgot birthdays or showed up drunk for Thanksgiving. How I cleaned up his messes, patched up his excuses, and still got told I lacked drive. I wonder if she kept reading because it hurt, or because it was the first time she'd ever seen who I really was. There were entries about the time she accused me of faking a fever to get out of school. When I'd actually had the flu and ended up vomiting in the bathroom all night. About the Christmas I saved up for 3 months to buy her a necklace she never wore. About the job interview I skipped when she needed someone to take her to the doctor, and never once said thank you. Then came the part one think broke her. The fiction. It was a story within the diary. Half memoir, half novel. I called the girl Ellie. A name close enough to mine to be obvious. Ellie lived in a house full of noise. But no one listened. She made herself small, so they'd love her. She stayed, even when her bones begged her to go. And in the end, when they finally told her she didn't belong, she packed her silence and left. No fight. Just a goodbye written in the folds of an empty bed. Ellie wasn't angry, just tired. Mom kept reading. She found the part where Ellie stood in the kitchen while her parents compared her to a shadow. Where Ellie wrote, "You can love someone with everything you have, and still not be enough for them to see you." Dad read it too. Maybe not at first. He wasn't one to go digging through feelings. But that night, he sat with the journal in the living room, flipping pages long after the sun went down. Neither of them called me. Not yet. They didn't know where I'd gone. And truthfully, I didn't care if they ever did. Because for the first time in 28 years, they were the ones left sitting in silence. The town I landed in wasn't anything special. It had one main street, a coffee shop with flickering lights, and a bookstore that smelled like old paperbacks and lemon cleaner. But to me, it felt like freedom. I rented a room above a florist's shop run by an older woman named June. She didn't ask questions when I paid the first month's rent in cash. She just handed me a key and said, "Sometimes you don't need a reason to start over. Just breathe-in's enough." The room had a twin bed, a chipped dresser, and a view of the back alley. I didn't care. It was mine. No one told me to fix the curtains. No one reminded me to keep quiet after 9. I could leave dishes in the sink if I wanted. That first night, I slept with the window open and cried without covering my mouth. For the first time in years, I wrote without hiding. I'd start each morning at the little coffee shop, sit by the window with a blueberry muffin, and let the words pour out. Ellie, the fictional me, was finding her feet. Her voice got stronger, her chapters more daring. I let her say things I'd never been brave enough to speak aloud. Things like, love should never feel like debt. Or, some wounds don't bleed, they just echo. I emailed a few chapters to a small online literary magazine. To my surprise, they wrote back, said my writing was raw, vulnerable, and oddly universal. They wanted to publish an excerpt. For the first time, I saw my name, Elena Carter, in print. Just a small corner of the internet. But it felt like standing in sunlight after years underground. And then, about 3 weeks in, the first letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, scrawled in my father's handwriting. Inside, a single line. We found your journal. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't expect it. I'd known it would happen eventually, but because that was all it said. No apology. No, please come home. Just a quiet confirmation that the words I'd spilled across those pages had finally been heard. I didn't reply. A week later, another letter came. This time, from my mother. The envelope was thicker. Inside, folded into 4 tight creases, was a note written in her trembling script. I read every word. Every word. Elena, I didn't know, or maybe I did. But I didn't want to. I'm ashamed. Truly. Not just for what we said that night, but for every moment we let you feel invisible. I wore the necklace yesterday. The one you gave me at Christmas in 2017. I never deserved your kindness. I'm so sorry. I put the letter back in its envelope and set it on my nightstand. I didn't cry. I just felt tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from walking or working, but from carrying weight that was never meant to be yours. They kept writing. Not every day, but every so often, a new envelope would appear. Dad's were shorter, more facts than feelings. We reread your graduation letter. You always made the coffee just the way I liked it. Ryan asked about you. Mom's were longer. She told me about the things she'd been noticing now, the gaps. The silences in the house. How strange it felt to do things herself. How dinner didn't taste right anymore. But still, no one said, come home. And I was glad. Because I wasn't looking for an invitation. I didn't need it anymore. One afternoon, while restocking the poetry section at the bookstore, June walked over and handed me a package. No note. Just a thick, padded envelope with a familiar scrawl across the front. Inside was my journal. My old, worn out, tear-stained journal. They'd mailed it back. I opened it slowly, page by page. They'd tucked tiny sticky notes inside. One on a page I wrote at 21. About the time Mom missed my birthday dinner because Ryan was in town. The note read, I remember this night. I thought you were fine. I didn't ask. I should have. Another was next to an entry about how I used to sneak into the basement to cry where no one could hear. This note said, you were so quiet. We mistook your silence for strength. I closed the book and held it to my chest. They couldn't rewrite the past. But for the first time, I felt like they'd opened the curtains, just a little, and looked at the daughter they'd never bothered to truly see. Fall came slowly to the coast. The kind of slow that lets you feel every shift in the air, a little crisper in the mornings. The trees starting to dull from green to rust. I'd been in town for 2 months. People were starting to remember my name at the coffee shop. June taught me how to press flowers between pages and add them to bookmarks we sold at the register. I didn't miss home. I missed the idea of it, the version that never existed. I finished the last chapter of the novel on a rainy Thursday. I remember because the roof leaked, and I had to slide the desk closer to the window to avoid the drip. Ellie had finally left, not just the house but the memory of it. She was walking along a shoreline, salt in her lungs, her past like footprints behind her that the tide would soon erase. I didn't know what to do when I typed the final period. I stared at it for a long time, wondering if this was how it felt to be free. That night, I printed the manuscript at the library, all 247 pages, and sent it off to 3 small publishers. I didn't expect anything. It just felt good to put it out there, like a bottled message tossed into the ocean. Not for rescue, But for release, I still had the letters. I kept them in a shoebox under my bed, tied with an old ribbon from one of Mom's gift wrap drawers. I hadn't replied to any of them. Not because I was angry, not anymore. But because the part of me that used to write for their attention no longer needed to be seen by them to feel real. Then, a letter came with a new handwriting. Neater. Younger. Ryan. It surprised me. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Not since his last visit home, where he complimented my haircut without looking up from his phone. His letter was short. Just one page. Mom's not doing well. She's been asking about you a lot. Dad reads parts of your journal aloud to her sometimes. I didn't get it at first. But now I think I do. I'm sorry I didn't see you either. I hope you're safe, wherever you are. I folded it and set it beside the others. I didn't feel guilt. I felt sad, but in a clean way. Like air after a storm. That weekend, I got a call from the literary magazine. One of the publishers they partnered with had read the excerpt and wanted to see more. Said they were moved. That the story had a soft strength that cuts through the noise. They asked if I'd consider publishing under my real name. I didn't hesitate. Yes. Elena Carter. The first time I saw the mock-up of the book cover, I stared at it for 15 minutes before saying a word. It was simple. A girl walking away from a house. Barefoot. Holding a small book in one hand. The title was in lowercase. The Quiet Kind of Gone. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone. When the book was released 3 months later, the initial response was quiet. A few reviews. Some shares online. Then one day, a stranger emailed me. She was 62. Said she'd read my story while caring for her sister with dementia. That she'd always been the forgotten one in her family. 2. She wrote. Your words said things I've never been able to say out loud. Thank you for giving people like me a voice. More letters came. More emails. I started reading them at night. One by one. All from people who had packed in silence. Who'd been told they were mistakes. Who'd left not out of hatred, but out of grief that had nowhere else to go. The book wasn't a bestseller, but it reached the ones who needed it. And that, to me, was everything. A few days before my 29th birthday, a package arrived. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Inside was a photo. It was old, a picture of me and Ryan in the backyard. Ages 6 and 10, holding sparklers in the summer dusk. We were laughing, genuine, open-mouthed, unguarded joy. Before the measuring began, before the weight settled on my shoulders like it had always been mine to carry. Taped to the back was a note. Happy birthday, Ellie. No signature, but I knew who it was from. And for the first time in my life, I didn't ache for what wasn't written. I just smiled. The days were shorter now. Light came late and left early. And I found myself waking before dawn without meaning to. My room above the flower shop smelled faintly of eucalyptus and old paper. A mix that had somehow become comforting. I'd begun a second book. Not because anyone asked for one, but because the words kept coming. Ellie had more to say. One morning, I was halfway through a chapter when June knocked on my door holding a postcard. Pale blue with a photo of a lighthouse on the front. There's no return address, she said. Thought it might be worth a peek. I turned it over. The handwriting was thin, careful. Your book sits on the kitchen table. Your father reads a chapter each week out loud. Sometimes he has to stop to collect himself. He cries more now. I think he's learning how. It wasn't signed, but I knew. My mother had always written in loops. When she was angry, her words slanted harder to the right. This one was soft, almost round. I held the card to my chest. Not because it healed anything, but because it told me they were still listening. That weekend, I went for a walk along the shoreline. The tide had pulled back, revealing little pockets of sea glass, smooth and cold in my palm. I remembered something Mom once said when I was a teenager and had come home crying after a teacher embarrassed me in class. People don't mean to be cruel, she'd said while not looking at me. They just forget to be kind. At the time, it didn't comfort me, but now, standing there barefoot in the sand, I realized she hadn't been talking about my teacher. She'd been talking about herself. Some people don't mean to break you. They just never learned how to hold you gently. A few weeks later, I received an email from a local university asking if I'd be open to guest lecturing in a writing course. One of the professors had read The Quiet Kind of Gone and thought the students would benefit from hearing how the story came to be. I said yes, though the thought of standing in front of a room again made my hands sweat. On the day of the talk, I wore the same cardigan I'd worn when I finished my manuscript. It still had a small tear at the sleeve, but I didn't mind. I carried my marked-up copy of the book and a stack of note cards I barely looked at. When I started to speak, the words came slower than I expected, not because I was nervous, but because they mattered. I told them about Ellie, about growing up in a home full of noise and silence at the same time, about invisible burdens and the kind of loneliness that wraps itself around your ribs and settles there like it belongs. I told them the truth, gently. Afterward, a girl with shy eyes and bitten fingernails came up to me. She said, "It felt like you were telling my story." I didn't know anyone else ever felt that way. I wanted to tell her I still did. Sometimes. Instead, I said, "You're not alone. You never were." That night, I walked home past quiet houses with warm windows and imagined the kind of childhood where someone waits up for you just to say they're glad you're home. I let the thought come, then let it go. Some dreams aren't for living, just for understanding. When I got back, June was sitting on the front steps, sipping chamomile tea from a chipped mug. "Got another letter for you," she said, holding it out. This one had no stamp. Hand-delivered, folded neatly in half, tucked inside a faded envelope with my name in all caps across the front. I opened it slowly. "We understand why you left. We don't deserve your forgiveness. But we want you to know, we read every word. Not just once. Over and over. You gave us a mirror we didn't ask for, but needed. You are not a mistake. You never were. If you ever feel ready, we'd love to hear your voice again, even if only on paper." For the first time in nearly a year, I let the tears come. Not the hot, angry kind, the quiet kind, the kind that didn't demand anything. That just released. I sat on the steps until the stars came out. The letter folded in my lap like a second heartbeat. I didn't know if I'd write back. I didn't feel rushed to decide. Sometimes, healing doesn't come in loud declarations. Sometimes it's a soft knocking at your door, a space left open if ever you choose to walk back through it. And for once, I knew I could choose. Winter came quiet and soft that year. No heavy storms, just a slow hush over the town, bare trees dusted with frost. The florist's windows fogged from the warmth inside. I spent most mornings in the shop with June, wrapping poinsettias in gold foil and tying ribbons with numb fingers. It was a different kind of holiday season. No family gatherings, no forced smiles over dry turkey. Just peace. Sometimes I'd walk past houses lit with Christmas lights and feel a pinch of something, not regret exactly, but memory. I remembered the years I'd stayed home, hoping one thoughtful gesture might thaw the air between us. How I used to bake cookies from scratch, light the candles early, set the table just right, praying someone would notice. I don't think they ever did. This time, I didn't bake anything. Instead, I wrote. The second book was nearly done. Ellie was older now, her story less about escape and more about what it meant to build something of your own. Not a life that made others proud, just one that felt honest. She was learning how to rest without guilt, how to stop flinching when someone offered her love. I was learning that too. It was New Year's Eve when the package arrived. No note, no sender, just a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Inside was a hardcover copy of The Quiet Kind of Gone, but not just any copy. This one had sticky notes along the margins, words underlined in different colors, passages circled like someone had read it again and again. Tucked inside was a photograph. It was my mother, sitting on the back porch, wrapped in the green quilt I used to keep in my room. The photo was candid, her eyes looking down, soft lines around her mouth, hands folded in her lap like she didn't quite know what to do with them. Written on the back in my father's careful hand, "We're still here, still listening." I didn't know what it meant, if it was an invitation, a message, or something in between. I held the photo for a long time. Not because it made me want to go back, but because for the first time, They weren't pretending anymore. They weren't defending or excusing. They were just present. That night, I wrote a letter. Not a reply. Not exactly. Just a note I folded and placed on my nightstand. I don't hate you. I needed to leave so I could hear myself think. Maybe one day, I'll be ready to come back. Maybe not to the house, but to the space between us. For now, thank you for finally looking. I didn't mail it. I didn't need to. Writing it was enough. January passed in a blur of cold mornings and hot tea. The second manuscript went to the publisher in early February. I didn't check for updates. I just let it go. Life settled into its own rhythm, quieter, but full in a way that didn't need noise. I started hosting a small writing group at the bookstore once a week. Mostly women, some older than me, some younger, all of us with stories we'd never told before. We read aloud in whispers and laughed in gasps. It was healing in a way therapy had never quite managed. And then, in early spring, something changed. I woke up to an email with a subject line I almost ignored. Congratulations, Elena. It was from the publisher. They were nominating The Quiet Kind of Gone for a regional literary award, nothing national. Nothing flashy, but it would mean a printed feature in a journal, a speaking event in the city, and a small ceremony. I stared at the screen, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Instead, I called June. She picked up on the second ring. And before I could say a word, she said, "Well, it's about time." We went out that night. Just the two of us. And toasted with cheap wine under the fairy lights behind the shop. I felt light, real, like I'd come full circle without ever going back. Later that evening, as I was locking up, I found another envelope tucked beneath the shop door. Small, cream-colored, and clean. Inside was a single sentence, written in the middle of the page. We saw the article. We're proud. No names, no signatures, just that. I pressed the paper flat, then folded it into my wallet behind my library card. And for the first time since I left, I whispered out loud, "Thank you." Not because they got it all right, but because, somehow, they'd finally learned to speak in my language, the quiet one. The one that didn't need grand gestures. Only truth. The award ceremony was held in a small theater tucked between a library and a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and flour. The seats were red velvet, the kind that creaked when you shifted too much. I sat near the back at first, holding my name tag between my fingers like it might disappear if I let go. They called my name midway through the evening. I wasn't expecting to win. I'd come for the experience, not the outcome. But when I stood at the podium under the soft spotlight, the room blurred for a second. I saw faces I didn't know. Strangers leaning in just a little closer, as if my story had become part of theirs. I didn't say anything rehearsed. I just spoke the way I always wrote, slow, honest, from the part of me that had lived quiet for too long. I wrote this book because I needed to tell the truth. I said, not to change anyone's mind, not to punish, just to be heard. And if you've ever felt like your silence was mistaken for strength, or your loyalty mistaken for weakness, this is for you. You're not alone. You never were. The applause was gentle, respectful, the kind that doesn't chase glory, just connection. When it was over, I walked outside into the cool night and stood on the sidewalk for a long time. Cars passed. Laughter floated from the bakery next door. I could have left right then, but something told me to wait. 10 minutes passed, then 15, and then I saw them. My parents. Not together, not arm in arm, but near each other. Mom in a navy coat I didn't recognize, her hands wringing a tissue. Dad in his old brown jacket, the one he used to wear to Sunday dinners. They didn't approach right away, just stood there at the edge of the curb like people unsure if they were welcome. Mom stepped forward first. "You looked calm up there," she said. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. I nodded. I was. She reached into her bag and pulled out my book, worn, dog-eared, a dozen tabs sticking out at odd angles. "I've read it 5 times. She whispered. "I see you now." "I do." Dad cleared his throat. He wasn't good with words. Never had been. But he looked me in the eye and said, "You wrote the truth. And we didn't make it easy for you. But it was always there. Wasn't it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Some truths sit better in silence. They didn't ask to come back into my life. They didn't beg for forgiveness. They didn't try to rewrite what had been done. They simply stood with me. Quiet, present, like they were finally learning how to just be. We didn't talk long. Just enough to say what needed to be said, no more. No less. Before they left, Mom touched my hand lightly, like testing if she still had permission. I hope you keep writing. She said. I will, I told her, even if no one reads it. I walked back to my room that night under a sky full of stars. The air cool and clean. When I got home, I took off my shoes, made a cup of tea, and sat by the window with a blanket wrapped around my legs. There was a time I thought peace would come from being accepted. From finally hearing, "We're proud of you," or, "We were wrong." But it didn't. Peace came when I stopped asking for it. When I stopped hoping they'd change and started choosing myself instead. I opened my journal, a new one now, with clean pages and a thicker spine, and I wrote the final line of my second book. The love I once begged for, I now give to myself freely. That is the quiet kind of gone. Not a fleeing, not a vanishing, but a return to where I always belonged. I closed the book, took a slow sip of tea, and smiled at nothing in particular. Sometimes, the love you wanted isn't the love you needed. And I found peace when I stopped asking for what they couldn't give.